My name is Tammy Stansfield. I work for Family Search. I'm responsible for the United States and Canada for our Family Search International. Joining us is John DeYoung, who is the area manager over the United States Northeast area. And we have Manny Sanhueza, who's our regional manager. He covers the same area and also up into Canada. And then we just want to thank you for being here, and let me just introduce our program and then turn it over so we can hear from the people who you really came to hear from. So Stephen Valentine is our first speaker. He's our Senior Vice President of Family Search International, and he has just a very small portion of the world. He has North America, Africa, Middle East, and Europe. So he is a very busy man. He's also, what many people might not know, is he's a gifted writer and a published author, and he has a passion for connecting families through their stories across generations. Following Stephen Valentine, we'll hear from Stephen Lean. Apparently we collect Stevens, which is a great thing. Stephen's a great friend of ours. He is from the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation and is the director of the American Family Immigration Center located out at Ellis Island, which we were just at yesterday. And it's a beautiful place and a great ambiance and tone and theme. Under Stephen's leadership, the History Center's team is an indispensable resource for visitors seeking connections to their immigrant story. And then we're also happy to welcome our guests from the New York City Department of Records and Information Services and the New York City Municipal Archives. Pauline Toole. Where's Pauline? Do you want to? Pauline is the commissioner for the at the New York City Department of Records and Information Services, and she has brought with her our wonderful friends Ken Cobb is the assistant commissioner, and Sylvia Kohler is the director of the New York City Municipal Archives. And so we're welcome that they will be with us to address us. So we'll continue to that point, and then I'm going to welcome John DeYoung, if you will come up, and you have a few moments to share some thoughts, and then if you'll introduce Elder Haney. Okay, and we'll go to that point. Thank you.
All right, well, it is an honor to be here with you today, and what an incredible forum that this has been. I just wanted to start out and talk a little bit about this young kid on this bike here. And I'm sad to say that there's nobody left on this planet that remembers this young man. And if not for a very coincidental incident that I'll share, no one, including myself, would know anything about him. There's not a paper document that exists that documents that he ever lived on this earth. He would be lost forever to a lost memory. But in the same plot of land as you see here, this is the front yard, this is the side yard of the same house. A few years ago, I was there. This was my father, this is my son and a friend, and we were metal detecting because my family has lived on the same plot of ground. Now, this is not long from the East Coast, but where I come from in Utah, 130 years is a long time. And so my family had been on the same plot of ground for 130 years. So I thought, there's got to be some cool treasures down on the ground, right? Maybe some lost rings or, something kind of fun. So we're out there metal detecting, and we're getting little pings in the ground, and you pull out a bottle top or something, and a bunch of junk, right, that was down in the earth. And so I thought that's all we were going to find that day. And as we were going along, suddenly I got a really solid ping. I'm like, well, that could be interesting. So we dig down, and we're probably about this far down. I mean, we were way about as far down as you're going to get with a metal detector like that. And I'm digging, and I pull out this piece of metal. And I thought, it's just another piece of junk. And so I was going to toss it to the side. It was this piece of metal right here. And I'll give you a little blow up on the screen. So we pull this piece of metal out. I'm like, that's just scrap. So I go to toss it on the junk heap. And my father, who'd been watching all this with great skepticism, like this was voodoo magic, right? This whole metal detecting. He didn't believe any of this. And he sees this piece of metal, and he rushes over, and he takes it like it's like the Ark of the Covenant had just come up out of the ground. He was so excited to see, let me see that. He takes it in his hands, kind of cradle it. I'm like, Dad, what is, getting the dirt off it. He says, do you know what this is? I'm like, I have no idea. He says, let me tell you about my brother. Now, my dad was born in 1931. His brother was 20 years older. So this is way back in history here. He had a brother named Paul. I knew nothing about Paul. Nobody knew anything about Paul. He was handicapped as a child. He didn't read. He didn't speak much. He was a sweet, tender kid who loved his cousins, who loved his family. And the way he communicated was with a harmonica. And this was his harmonica, a piece of his harmonica that had dropped in the ground in like 1910, if we look at the time frames, and had been there for over 100 years, working its way down in the ground. So as I had this one piece of connection to my Uncle Paul, then I started asking questions and gathering photographs and asking my dad, before he no longer could remember, everything I possibly could piece together about Paul, and uncovered this incredible connection to this simple, pure young kid that otherwise would have been forgotten forever. Now, he's not important in the ways of the world. He's not going to show up at a panel discussion here. He didn't accomplish great things. But we believe at Family Search that every single person deserves to be remembered. No matter who they are, no matter what they accomplished, every person is a son or a daughter of God, and they all deserve to be remembered. We believe, as Alex Haley said, in all of us there is a hunger, marrow deep, to know our heritage, to know who we are and where we have come from. That has driven us as an organization since 1894. So who are we? Who is Family Search? We are a nonprofit organization. We are wholly owned and sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have been at this since 1894, a long time. And we've been all around the world since 1894 with a singular mission to preserve the world's heritage, to preserve the Paul Valentines in every single country. Since 1938, we helped pioneer microfilm technology and have been in archives around the world, helping them to preserve their records. We have over 11,000 agreements in 200 countries since 1938 to help preserve those microfilm. And I'll throw some stats at you for just really quick, but those stats really don't matter. What matters is why, and we'll get to that here in just one moment. So big numbers, this it doesn't. It's almost like it's funny math after a bit. We have 6 billion individual digital images on our website. That's about 13.7, 13.8 individual searchable records. That's a lot of names. That's a lot of people. In our open online tree on Family Search, we have almost 2 billion people that you can go in now and see the family relationships. All of this is available for free. As a church and a nonprofit, we've never charged anything for these services. It's all available as a gift back to the world. So all those images, all that searchable record, and this tree data is all available for free as we try and literally stitch together the family of humankind. That's a pretty audacious goal. And we're only about 2 billion in, but we're working on it. We're working on it. We have been across, just one more example, we were talking about written records and online resources, but what about those people that don't even have a paper document? So in Africa, as we've worked across the continent, the saying there is when the village elder dies, the town library burns down. Because in the absence of written records historically, it has been the village rememberer, the elder, the chief, who's been commissioned to remember the history of the village and the tribe and the family relationships. And as you interview them, they'll remember 15, 20, 25 generations back with perfect clarity. But they're dying, or their descendants are moving into the villages or into the cities, and that memory is being lost. And so for the last 10 years, and particularly the last 5 years, we've been on a fever pitch to go village by village by village, along with, it's not us, it's with them, but as we help them document their own history, we've now collected over 2.5 million individual interviews across 21 countries, and it's 350 million names now that have been linked together into a tree of all these countries across Africa, all currently available on our website. You can go in, you can see the photographs, you can listen to the audio recording over, I think it's about 350 individual dialects, some that are probably maybe the only time those have been recorded, and we just invite the heritage to be protected there forever. We have the world's largest genealogical library in Salt Lake City, but we also have 5,000 branch libraries around the world where you can come at any time and research and find your family connections. We host an annual event called Roots Tech. It's physically in Salt Lake City, but it's online. Last year we had over 12 million people attend that online conference, and about 15,000 people in Salt Lake City. And the themes are always the same. It's about how do you connect, how do you discover, how do you remember, right? The vast majority of people that engage with us are not members of our faith. It's only about 5% of that numbers are members of our faith, and 95% are not. We are again, this is a service, and we're so glad that people from around the world are engaging with us. So that's a lot of numbers, but really the question is why? Why do we do this? Why does Family Search do this? And let me get to this. We believe in this study that came out from Emory University a few years ago said this: children who know more about their family stories have better family functioning, lower levels of anxiety, fewer behavioral problems, and better resilience. Yes, we believe in the inherent nature of connecting our families and knowing about our ancestors. But we also know that as you do that, it does something for the living today. It helps our families to be stronger. It helps our youth to have a greater sense of identity and connection in this troubled world. It's at the core of our belief system. One of our leaders, Elder Garrett W. Gong, said, "Connecting with our ancestors can change our lives in surprising ways. From their trials and accomplishments, we gain faith and strength. From their love and sacrifices, we learn to forgive and move forward. Our children become resilient. We gain protection and power. Ties with ancestors increase family closeness, gratitude, and miracles." That's why we do it. So I encourage you, you may, as you listen to this, as you move on with your busy lives, there are small and simple things you can do. Simply, we have a few handouts here, but simply add what you know to your family's memory. You can come onto our site or any other website, and you'll hear about great resources today from our panel. But we just encourage you, share your family stories. Share those photographs. Sit down with your children, your grandchildren. Don't let the Paul Valentines be forgotten. Right? Everybody deserves to be remembered. So thank you very much.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Lean. I work for the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. We are a nonpartisan, non-sectarian nonprofit. And when I put it like that, it sounds like we don't get to have any fun at all. So what am I doing at such a spirited, spiritful event? Please don't throw me out, Elder Haney. Give me a few minutes to explain. Because...
We'll have a vote.
Yeah, it's just no pressure, right? So I, as the director of the American Family Immigration History Center, I and my team get to guide people through the process of the discovery of family history. And this, in and of itself, is reflective of a certain kind of faith. And the records that we look at will sometimes very explicitly reflect the faith of those who went through this immigration process on Ellis Island. One of my main tasks as director is to make sure that everybody, whether they are in person or just visiting our website, statueofliberty.org, knows that the Ellis Island experience applies to them too. There are plenty of reasons why you may not have an arrival record of the Ellis Island variety. Perhaps your family is one of the rich tapestry of indigenous communities that was here before transatlantic immigration started. Perhaps your family's story includes involuntary movement of people who were enslaved. Perhaps your family's immigration story happened before standardized records exist, or it's so recent that those records are not made public yet. These are all reasons why you may not have an actual document to look at. But the story of Ellis Island is the story of labels. The labels that we put upon ourselves and take pride in, as well as the labels that people put upon us and that might cause us shame or pain or have negative consequences. I mentioned this example to Stephen yesterday, and it really has stuck with me. We all know what it's like to be on the outside looking in. It could be something as simple as showing up on the first day of school with the wrong kind of sneakers. Whatever it is that the cool kids were wearing, you didn't get the memo, you don't fit in, you don't have a sense of place. Think of the unease that those little situations make us feel. That's an Ellis Island experience. If your name or your title or pronoun were misspelled on any of your badges today, that is an Ellis Island experience. And a sense of place is very important. I was recently lucky enough to co-present with Dr. Timothy Rarick, who is the professor of marriage and family studies at Brigham Young University in Idaho. And his studies have shown what Stephen Valentine just said. People who have a sense of place in a family, in a community, there are fewer instances of substance abuse, there are fewer instances of engaging in other kinds of antisocial, addictive behavior that can really tear families and communities apart. But the experience that I have and the experience that my team has at Ellis Island, it's not as long-term as that. We get that immediate experience that I would liken to the Road to Damascus experience, sitting under the Bodhi tree, looking at the burning bush, the pillar of fire, the pillar of smoke. Because when we see people, and it's only on a computer screen that we can let them look at these documents, when that person sees the name of their ancestor on, miraculous happens and they open up and the tears start flowing, and at the moment that this person stops thinking about themselves and starts focusing on someone else, they also explore the regions of their emotional and spiritual lexicon that they've maybe never tapped into before. So this is the kind of experience that requires a great deal of empathy. And I tell people that I hire, I tell people that visit us on Ellis Island, the key to a good family history search is empathy. Not just for the people who are searching, but for the people who are on these documents waiting to be discovered. In any story, the journeyman and his destiny are both main characters. And it's the same with family history. We do have the faith of these immigrants reflected on these documents, even though mostly these documents are recording external factors: age, date, marital status, sex, who they're coming to join, who they're leaving behind. There are some instances, particularly with the Jewish community who was immigrating in large numbers from Eastern Europe during the 1880s all the way through the 1920s, where we will see their faith community reflected directly on these documents. From 1903 on, if you were from a Jewish background, your race or ethnicity on a manifest is going to be recorded as, quote, Hebrew. This has nothing to do with how observant you were. This has nothing to do with your inward faith journey. This is a reflection of a couple of different things. It's the reflection of the prevalence of the pseudoscience of eugenics at the turn of the century, and there is something a little bit more practical to it too, because if you find one of these manifests and someone in your family is listed as Hebrew, go to the bottom of that manifest, look for the asterisk doing what asterisks do best, which is hide some weird language, and it says, per immigration law, race or people is determined by the stock from which they came, which is that eugenics coming in there, and the language they speak. If you were coming from a Jewish background, regardless of what place on the map you may be from, perhaps one of the languages you speak, maybe your first language is Yiddish. And this helps the immigration inspectors on Ellis Island decide which kind of interpreter they need up at the desk when you come to plead your case as to why you're coming through. Sometimes we have to know the context, historically, a broader context, to see that kind of information in these records. Gitzim Borglum. Among other things, he is responsible for carving Mount Rushmore. We know from his personal history he is the son of Danish immigrants who joined the Latter-day Saint community in Denmark and were traveling to the Western United States to join their larger faith community. So for these folks, in a way, setting foot in a country they had never been in before was a spiritual homecoming. When the yogi and guru Paramahansa Yogananda arrived, it was with the hope and the knowledge that the West was ready for different modes of thinking. But 19th and 20th century being what it is, most people were arriving at Ellis Island because of the negative impacts of being labeled a certain faith. I've mentioned a lot of the Jewish immigrants that came through Ellis Island beginning in 1881, when a horrendous series of pogroms was instituted by the Tsar of Russia. The Tatars, a Muslim community, minority ethnic community in Poland, they also arrived in New York City in the early 20th century, and they set up the Power Street Mosque just across the East River in Williamsburg. That is the oldest continuously used mosque in New York and one of the oldest in this country. When Professor Joseph R. Bealey and his family arrived before Ellis Island in the 1870s, they're credited as being the first Syrian family to immigrate to America. That's debatable. What's not debatable is the reason why they came, because the Arbeelys were Arab Christians, and they were facing persecution by the Ottoman Empire. They were actually coming to go to Tennessee, to a Christian Bible college, where their linguistic knowledge and their faith would serve them well. And what we see, regardless of the push and pull factors, or usually the blend of push and pull, is that faith is what people identify with almost more than anything. And it's their faith that tends to determine how their identity evolved after they arrived. And sometimes it's the challenge to that faith. When people come into the History Center, the things that they remember about the person that they're looking for, a grandparent, a great-grandparent, it's the religious items in their house, and it's what they ate when they visited this grandparent. How do you know which neighborhood is the Chinese neighborhood, the Romanian neighborhood, the Ukrainian neighborhood? It's based on what houses of worship are there and what restaurants are there. What kind of food can you get? The prayers that come out of our mouth and the food that goes into it are extremely important when it comes to determining your sense of place. And something that always strikes me, in his book, World of Their Fathers, Irving Howe mentions the challenge. What about faithful and observant Jews who come to this country, are introduced to the economic system, the societal structure that really says, you think you have a God? Your new God here is the almighty dollar. This is not true only for people of the Jewish faith. Christians who were coming over who believed in the Trinity, they were told, this is your new Trinity, your boss, your paycheck, and your landlord. And the strength that people drew to keep their faith, or in some cases, abandon their faith, that's a determining factor in how that identity evolved and why names are changed. This is a determining factor in the impact that these people have on America, as well as the impact America has on these immigrants. And finally, I would say that working at the History Center, working in family history, it is a faith community in a sense. Because show me the person who's seeking that doesn't have faith. You may not have certainty, but the faith that something is out there. It may not look like an answer, and it may not be the answer that you want, but faith is never in short supply with those of us who are seeking more knowledge about our sense of place in our family and in our community. So I would welcome you to that faith community, and I would say that the faith reflected from those who are engaging in family history also reflects the faith that 12 million immigrants who were processed at Ellis Island had, that something better lay across the horizon. Thank you.
So Ken and I are both representing the Department of Records and Information Services. Okay. And I'll just give an overview of the department, and Ken will get into a really great story. The Department of Records and Information Services preserves and provides access to historical and contemporary records of New York City municipal government. The department sets policy and provides guidance to the mayor's office and other city agencies on managing their records. The Municipal Library, one division of the department, established in 1913, collects and preserves city publications, including journals, books, and annual reports related to the city's history and governance. The library's collections also include valuable resources for family historians, such as lists of registered voters, the civil list of city employees dating from the 19th century, biographical files and clippings, and also numerous publications on city and statewide genealogical resources. The Municipal Archives was founded in 1950 and consists of over 200,000 cubic feet and 300 terabytes of historical records. The collections date from the early Dutch colonial period to the present and comprise one of the largest local government archives in North America. The records exist in various formats, including paper, still and moving images, ledgers, cartographic materials, and also sound recordings. The collections of New Amsterdam and Old Town records document deeds, wills, financial and legal proceedings within the towns and villages in what now make up the 5 New York City boroughs. Mayoral collections beginning in 1826 are among the most requested and critical collections that highlight issues, challenges, and successes of 200 years of administrations. And another collection of interest to family historians is the Almshouse Collection. It includes over 400 volumes pertaining to city-run institutions, including almshouses, workhouses, penitentiary, and various hospitals from 1758 through 1952. The records were digitized and are available on our digital collection site. The records include the Department of Public Charities and Corrections also. That department was responsible for burying indigent and unclaimed persons at the city cemetery, and early records date from 1881. They include admissions, discharges, deaths, and census volumes. And of course, vital records. The archive's collection of death, marriage, and birth records number more than 13 million. With over 50,000 requests a year, the agency recognized the timeliness of digitization and the importance of expanding access to those collections. Yes, it is E. Cummings and Ann Barton. Yeah. In 2013, Doris embarked on a multi-year program to digitize, preserve, and publish the Vital Records collections. And in the first phase, the agency organized a large team. It consisted of technologists, database managers, digitization technicians, metadata creators, collections managers, and preservation and conservation staff. All significant roles required to create the useful resource. After first launching an internal application to test and fulfill requests, the small but very mighty application development team scaled the application to publish what we have online today, the Historical Vital Records site. They built a robust, secure, easy-to-use platform capable of handling a large volume of users simultaneously. And as a result, on day one of the public launch, more than 25,000 users from across the globe accessed the site and downloaded over 12,000 records. Over the past several years, more than 1 million additional records have been digitized, preserved, and made available, and we're up to 10.2 million records on the site, almost 10.3. The work to ensure long-term preservation and access includes physical conservation treatments for the certificates and ledgers, maintaining and monitoring environmental controls, updating and revising descriptive and technical data. We leverage multiple applications and tools to do the work, and we continue to follow evolving best practices and standards in digital preservation. And we also look forward to adding more content and functionality to the Historical Vital Records site. Last, city archivists have begun working on a comprehensive guide to the New York City Vital Records. In addition to the birth, death, and marriages, the guides detail records of enslaved people that date from 1760, including manumissions. And next, Ken will tell us how he used the Vital Records collection to provide identity to a formerly enslaved New Yorker.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, okay. I'm going to take a minute to focus a little bit more on our historical vital records, which somehow went too quickly.
Sorry.
As an example of how they relate to discovering personal histories, the theme of this panel. And I'm focused in particular on the history of a formerly enslaved person. So, to William Cowenhoven, town clerk. These are to certify that a male child is born to my female slave Bet, on the 28th day of March 1806, which child is named Tom, and so on. This record, and many others like it in the archives, were created in response to the 1799 New York State law for gradual emancipation. Now, just so you know, about 15% of New York population were enslaved people in the 1790s. Now, looking at this record, I got to thinking maybe our historical vital records could tell us more about these enslaved children, perhaps giving them a more complete identity. Problem is that the vital records for the towns and villages in Brooklyn and Queens, where most of these manumissions took place, only date back to the 1880s. But I thought, I'll give it a try anyway. So I started reading the death ledgers, as one does, and I came across this one in the town of Newtown, Queens. And I soon came across this entry. Number 982, date of death, March 2nd, 1885. Name of deceased, George Rex, age 89. Then under occupation, as you can see, the clerk wrote very clearly, the last slave. So apparently, Mr. George Rex had been born and lived at least part of his life as an enslaved person, and was well known in his community as the last person to have had that experience. The register also recorded his birthplace as Trains Meadow on the Rapplier Purdy Farm. Seems sort of obscure, but sure enough, there's a map I found in the map of Newtown. I found it in our library, and there's Trains Meadows, and it does border on the Rapplier and Purdy farms. Then I had the idea that since Mr. Rex seems to have been well known in his community, perhaps the newspapers reported on his death. And I was right. I know it's hard to read, but there's a line in there that says, the old man was believed to have been the last Negro slave freed on Long Island. It also reported that he had been owned by the Rapplier family. But what really helped was the information that he was the father-in-law of one J.C. Tower. And here's the marriage record of George Rex's daughter, Phoebe, to Mr. Tower. As you can see here, it lists her father's George Rex. The name got changed spelling to Rix at some point, but it's definitely her. Now, I don't have the slides, but we've learned that Phoebe had several children who survived to marry and have children on their own. So now we're well on our way to building a family tree for Mr. George Rex, and with luck, maybe finding his descendants today. Now, the point of this journey is that thanks to Family Search and our 40-year partnership, as well as our own vital records, we are able to give an identity and dignity to Mr. George Rex, and with some more work, maybe to many others as well. So thank you.
I also want to thank New York. I have a friend at work, and I told him about their new website, and he said, well, I've got people from New York. And I said, well, see what you can find. And he actually was able to go back 2 generations from where he had a brick wall. He was stuck. And so thank you. This is an amazing effort that will bless the lives of many, many people. Elder Ellen D. Haney is the president of the United States Northeast area, and I've known him for a little over a year and met with him a number of times, and I know he is a gracious individual and cares a lot about individuals and people. Before his church service, he practiced law first with Lathan and Watkins and then in his own practice. And we're delighted to have him here today to be able to share with us his personal stories. Elder Haney.
I am probably the least qualified person in this room to talk about this subject, but when they invited me to do it and they told me what the topic was, I realized that I actually maybe could contribute something based on some experiences that I've had on this whole issue of finding these personal stories. I grew up in the state of Utah for a good portion of my life. And one of the strongest memories I have as a little boy was going to the cemetery with my mother's relatives on Memorial Day. Every single year, everybody would come, and these are people who sort of all lived and died in the same area. And so this cemetery in a small town called Smithfield had generations of members of my mother's family. And I learned about their stories literally by walking around with my grandparents and great uncles and great aunts, and they would stop at tombstones and tell me the stories of these people that were buried. I remember as a little kid thinking it was really cool to be standing on somebody's grave and hearing a story. It had a little kind of a spooky element to it that I liked, and that's how I connected to these people. And it happened year after year, and the stories became familiar to me. The interesting thing is my father's side of the family, I guess they just didn't like each other as much because it didn't happen on my father's side of the family. And so I knew very little about that side of the family. And in 2006, my oldest daughter married a young man from Colorado Springs in Colorado. And we were living in San Diego. It's where we raised our family. And so we decided to make a trek out of it. There were some ruins that we thought would be fun to take our kids to. And then suddenly I realized, that kind of gets us close to this town that I know I had heard that my family had helped colonize many years before. And so we decided to go to this little town called Manassas in Colorado. And the interesting thing is, kind of when my relatives were there, the town had about 500-600 people in it. And today it has about 1,000. So that shows you how they chose a great place, apparently, to build a community. It's doubled in 100 plus years. That's how it was a perfect spot to. And so we went to this town. I'd never been there. I'm now a father of 6, and I just never stepped foot on this part of the earth before. But we go to this town, and we find this. And now, as I look at this, this was kind of a pleasant place to be. This, not so much. And that probably says a lot about the challenges that the ancestors on my father's family had. But I found the tombstone of my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. And I knew relatively little about them. And so when I left Manassas, I knew this. I mean, that was all the information that I had, was what was on the tombstones. It showed the date when my great-grandfather Robert Milligan Haney was born and when he died, and the same thing with my great-grandmother, when she was born and when she died. But I left that place with, I don't know, there was something inside that, and some of you who've experienced this know it kind of tugs at you. And I thought there's something more I need to know about these people. And gratefully, there's Family Search, and it gave me more information. I learned that both of them were born and raised in Georgia. And then I started asking around, and I actually discovered that there were people on my father's side of the family who had things. And I started sort of collecting information. And I want to share 2 stories with you in particular that I wish I'd known earlier in my life, and that I've shared with my children because I think they're interesting stories. Both of them were young. In one case, my great-grandfather was a teenager. He was 17 years old My grandmother was actually 11 years younger than him, my great-grandmother. And they were in Georgia, and this is a faith story, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but this is when it sort of started for my family as missionaries showed up in Georgia, and both of these families chose to join that church. It was a time of candidly significant persecution. In fact, the leader of the church in the state of Georgia was actually murdered. And that caused these two families, and others to move west. And so they wanted to gather where there were other members of the church, candidly in part to worship together, but also for safety. And so you have a family of a widowed mother and a bunch of children. And my great-grandfather at the time was 17. He did not join the church at 17, but he came west with his family. And they were sent, as was the practice within the church at that time, to colonize a town in this place called Manasseh. I mean, they named it Manasseh after they got there. That first winter, when he arrived, they actually carved a place out of the bank of a cliff. And that first winter, that is where they lived. And the mother of the family died of exposure, and so just left these children. My great-grandfather was the oldest that was not married. There was one who was married who lived in a different community, kind of close but far away, and suddenly you have this group of children who have to find their way. And it's interesting to read. I have the account that my great-grandfather wrote before he passed away, as he described these feelings of abandonment. He says, we're in this place we know nothing about, we have no one, and we have to figure this out. The interesting thing, and I guess I have a soft spot for immigrants, because the only reason they survived that winter was a family, and we have the name, the Salazar family, from Mexico, who gave my ancestors a cow and gave them food. And they survived that winter because of the kindness of those who had been there before. They welcomed them as immigrants, I guess, of a sort. Some years later, my great-grandfather, at age about 24, decided to become associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and joined, and they immediately shipped him off on a mission to the southern parts of the United States. And meanwhile, Lydia's just growing up there. She has a family, she has parents, and she's getting older. He goes to the southern part of the U.S., spends a couple of years. That was during the time when missionaries in our church traveled often alone and with no money. They would just rely on the kindness of people to survive. He came home, and this is the story that I love. This is one I discovered. He came home, and there was a gathering of young people kind of their age, in their teens and in their early 20s or mid-20s. And the gathering was associated with the body of a person who died in the community. And they had the body at this house, and because they didn't have any mortuary type services, they would have to take care of the body for a few days until they were able to actually have the burial services. And so they would, around the clock, the record says, put cold cloth on the body to try to preserve it so that it would be okay until the came time of burial. And it sounds like a weird, activity, but apparently they were having a gathering of these, young adults to kind of during the night do this. Lydia showed up there with her boyfriend. And Robert showed up alone. He'd just come home from his mission. The girlfriends of Lydia did not like the guy that she was dating very much. And so at some point during this exercise, Robert and Lydia are in the kitchen of this house that had a door that had a lock on it and a key. The girlfriends locked them inside the kitchen and took the key. And the boyfriend was upset, but they were there long enough for Robert to propose to Lydia, and she accepted. And then they got married. And so that was, I thought, I met my wife in a college cafeteria. This is way more intriguing than that. But that's where my great-grandfather met and proposed in a matter of hours to Lydia, and they were married. They started out, he was a blacksmith, then he had a hardware store, gained a certain level of success, I guess, as a merchant in a small community like this, I guess. And then this is it. This is the family that was a product of that moment when they met and chose to grow in life together. You can see them, the old couple kind of in the middle is them with their children and their grandchildren. There's one person that's not in this picture. This is the other story. Her name was Adela, and she was their third child. Their first child died as an infant, and then they had 6 more children. They had a son, and then they had a daughter, and that was Adela. The tradition in the faith of those who, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is to serve missions. And so the oldest son goes on a mission. Adela is traveling to go to college in Utah from living in this little town in Colorado. It's called the BY Academy or something like that. I think it was called BYA, not BYU. And on the way, she meets a church leader from Colorado on the train. And as she's going to college, her parents think she's going to college, he talks her into going and visiting with the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, for us it's hard today to realize something like this would happen. She goes and meets with him. He calls her on a mission. And she says yes. And she goes off on a mission. Her parents have no clue that the daughter they thought was going to college is now on a mission. But she writes him a letter and lets him know, I'm now in, I think she was also in the southern mission of the church. She didn't even go home. She just went straight from there on a mission. Her mother loved her. They were very close by all the accounts. And her mother used to have conversations about her, kind of talk out loud to God about her daughter. And the account is that she was in her kitchen one day cleaning the floor. And she used to sometimes worry that something might happen to her. Again, this was a time when there was a lot of persecution still going on, religious persecution. And so she was in the kitchen cleaning the floor, and she said out loud, "She will be back." And her account is that a voice said, "No, she will not." And her husband came home and found Lydia just collapsed on the ground, weeping. And she told her husband what had happened, and her husband said, "Oh, you're just being a worried mother." And then a few weeks later, they received a telegram that she had, in fact, suddenly passed away. The interesting thing to the story is Lydia saying, "I never would have survived that had God not been kind enough to tell me in advance that it was going to happen. And that, for her, was the comfort that she needed to be able to survive. Because of them, I have this. And that's what these stories mean to me. I'm grateful to be part of a history of people of faith. And it's changed me knowing these stories. And so I encourage you, I love the fact that at Family Search, they have these records, these huge numbers, but this is the part I love. If I'm understanding this correctly, 20 million a month. That's people finding stories. Thank you.
A special thanks to all of our guests. Thank you so much for sharing your messages, and thank you for attending. We do offer at Family Search our humble services in not only just discovering your personal stories, but also please record your family stories. You have generations that want to come and say these kind of stories about you. So come to Family Search and find your ancestries and also add what you know. Thank you so very much. Enjoy the conference.